Welcome back to our channel, the place where hidden chapters, royal secrets, and the stories the palace won't publish finally come to light. Today, we bring you a breaking news. Fergie drops Meghan truth bomb that changes everything. Speculation has recently grown over the potential release of a memoir by Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York. Numerous insider accounts and analyses from monarchy observers indicate that the book would primarily focus on Ferguson's experiences both within and on the periphery of the British royal family, particularly emphasizing her relationship with Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex. Neither Ferguson nor her representatives have officially verified intentions for a memoir. However, the ongoing speculation has ignited extensive discourse regarding potential new revelations and their implications for the established narratives surrounding the House of Windsor and its contemporary members. The narrative as conveyed is thus more a nascent potential than a verified project, having already influenced the discourse on the royal family and the disputed recollection of its recent history. The assumption centers on the assertion that Ferguson, having experienced life as both an insider and a public figure adjacent to royalty, possesses a distinctive perspective on Meghan Markle's entry into and eventual exit from royal life. Sources claiming insight into Ferguson's plans indicate that any memoir would extend beyond the time frame following the 2018 royal wedding. Instead, it would chronicle Meghan's activities and associations prior to her engagement to Prince Harry. The proposed narrative aims to offer an alternative perspective on events by tracing Meghan's journey through elite social circles with which Ferguson is well acquainted, contrasting it with the public narrative promoted by the Sussexes and other media representations. The expected material, according on these reports, would encompass tales of private exchanges, initial social dynamics, and an unaccounted rift that remains publicly unaddressed by both Ferguson and Meghan. The unique role of Ferguson in royal affairs, coupled with the persistent intrigue surrounding the Sussexes' depiction of their experiences, has rendered the prospective book a subject of significant interest. Understanding the significance of Ferguson's book necessitates an examination of her personal and public trajectory. Her union with Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, in 1986 swiftly elevated her to international prominence. As the Duchess of York, commonly referred to as Fergie, she infused a spirited presence into an institution frequently regarded as stiff and steeped in tradition. However, her stint as a senior working royal was rather limited when juxtaposed with the longer-serving members of the family. After a separation in 1992 and a legal divorce in 1996, Ferguson aimed to rebuild a life focused on financial autonomy and a rehabilitated public image. The process of healing and reinvention has been a persistent motif in her public persona. Over the next decades, Ferguson has endured a series of prominent scandals that consistently challenged her fortitude and her connection with the wider royal institution. Tabloid photos and a 2010 sting operation that cast doubt on cash-for-access deals are episodes that have marred her public life and hampered her relationship with both the family and the public. Notwithstanding these incidents, she sustained a remarkably tight and lasting personal relationship with Prince Andrew, with whom she continues to dwell at Royal Lodge in Windsor. She cultivated and maintained a rapport with the late Queen Elizabeth II. Commentators have remarked that the Queen esteemed Ferguson's loyalty and enduring familial connections. These associations have at different intervals served as both a source of stability for Ferguson and a reminder of the constraints of royal protection. In recent years, Ferguson's reputation has been impacted by the intensified repercussions of problems related to Prince Andrew's connection with Jeffrey Epstein. The ensuing public and institutional reaction significantly diminished Andrew's public role and consequently exerted pressure on the York family's social and financial standing. Insiders indicate that this decline in status has rendered Ferguson more vulnerable and isolated than she has been for most of her adult life. The aforementioned fragility, along with a perception of marginalization within the existing royal framework, is suggested by authors as a possible impetus for her to narrate her tale on her own terms. From this perspective, a memoir would transcend ordinary gossip or opportunism. It could be perceived as the endeavor of a lady possessing both profound insight into royal life and a significant personal investment in the historical narrative of her family's involvement. The central assertion regarding Ferguson's anticipated book is that it would chronicle Meghan Markle's life before her official introduction to Prince Harry. These stories indicate that Meghan was already active in specific elite international social circles prior to her engagement to the royal family. This proposed history contests the more simplistic narrative of a Hollywood actress who fortuitously stumbled into European aristocracy. The assertion, as relayed by anonymous sources, is that Meghan's entry into powerful networks entailed introductions and participation in activities indicative of a prior familiarity with elite circles of influence. Marcus Anderson and Ron Burkle are two people frequently mentioned in accounts of this pre-royal era. Marcus Anderson, identified as a consultant linked to the Soho House network of exclusive members' clubs, has been portrayed by observers as a close confidant of Meghan, and socially as a facilitator who connects creative and enterprising individuals with prominent networks. Soho House, as an institution, embodies a network of exclusive venues, members-only bars, clubs, and hotels where cultural creators, executives, and celebrities frequently converge. For individuals aspiring to access specific social circles, such affiliations can be significant. Ron Burkle is recognized in publications as a wealthy investor with enduring charitable and social connections to political and cultural leaders. He is additionally recognized for his connections to royal family members via charity endeavors. Insiders reference an often mentioned anecdote, a 2017 wedding in Jamaica for a friend of Prince Harry, during which it is said that Meghan traveled on a private jet associated with Burkle, while Harry opted for commercial travel. Although this fact is insignificant on its own, sources view it as indicative of the access and privilege she enjoyed prior to her official association with the royal family. Having navigated for decades inside similar spheres of private aircraft elite clubs and high society connections, Ferguson is depicted as exceptionally positioned to observe and explain these interactions. Accounts suggest that Ferguson's intended narrative seeks to portray a version of Meghan prior to the palace's public relations influence, depicting her as a socially skilled individual maneuvering through wealth and power hierarchies, rather than as an inadvertent or naive participant in royal life. This depiction would not necessarily constitute a scandal. Instead, it would imply a more intentional and strategic interaction with the social structures associated with proximity to power. The significance of these purported memories from the viewpoint of their proponents resides in Ferguson's profound acquaintance with both the individuals and the unwritten norms that regulate elite social spheres. Upon Meghan's integration into the royal family, initial public reports suggested a generally favorable reaction from numerous relatives, including those from the York family. Sarah Ferguson publicly conveyed sympathy for Meghan in interviews, emphasizing her comprehension of the severe media attention that frequently accompanies individuals who join royal life. Her children, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, initially appeared as natural potential allies for Meghan. As younger royals raised within the institution, yet outside the direct line of succession, they possessed practical experience in reconciling public responsibilities with private career aspirations. Their lived experience in navigating the institution's expectations and the media's scrutiny indicated shared experiences with the Sussexes. However, accounts indicate that the warmth observed during the initial phases of the Sussexes' assimilation into royal life diminished over time. Sources referenced in these articles indicate that a gradual estrangement developed between Meghan and the York sisters as the Sussexes' public visibility heightened. Observers assert that Meghan perceived the Yorks from an altered perspective, less as equals and more as individuals whose significance within the royal hierarchy had been undermined by persistent issues surrounding their father. Reportedly, previously warm encounters became increasingly formal. Casual camaraderie was replaced by a more isolated dynamic in which Meghan and Harry functioned as a distinct, self-sufficient couple. The altered stance, as asserted by proponents of the narrative, was acutely recognized by Ferguson, for whom loyalty and solidarity within familial networks have frequently been defining characteristics. The slow decline of goodwill between the two households created the conditions for subsequent rupture. Informants regarding the purported deterioration of the relationship identify a particular incident as the pivotal moment, a communication failure perceived by Ferguson as an intentional repudiation. Ferguson contacted Meghan during a challenging personal period, reportedly amidst significant scrutiny of Prince Andrew and increased strain on the York family, but did not receive a response. The specific details of the outreach are ambiguous in public reports, but the account presented by insiders suggests that Meghan opted not to participate. The insiders depict the quiet as a strategic decision. They suggest that Meghan and her advisors may have assessed that any affiliation with the Yorks could adversely impact her emerging public persona and hence should be circumvented. For Ferguson, who has continuously prioritized loyalty as a fundamental personal principle, this imagined ghosting was felt as a distressing and personal affront rather than a typical social error. The reports in the media indicated that the lack of response suggested Ferguson was no longer viewed as a valuable associate with familial bonds and shared experiences, replaced by concerns of brand safeguarding and reputation management. Should the portrayal presented by these sources be acknowledged, the poignancy of that time served as a partial emotional catalyst for the decision to contemplate recounting the narrative as she recalls it. If these stories are correct, the purported dismissal transformed lingering disappointment into a determined effort to regain a prominent voice in the public discourse. If Ferguson's memoir is published, insiders predict it would cover several subjects that could undermine the narrative presented by Meghan and Prince Harry. A often referenced claim is that Meghan previously expressed interest in Prince Andrew prior to her relationship with Prince Harry. This assertion, which has proliferated in tabloid and internet platforms, suggests that Meghan, during her initial foray into British high society, may have perceived a link with Andrew as a means to access royal circles. The narrative indicates that Ferguson became cognizant of this interest and dissuaded any attempts at engagement. In that context, the narrative may reflect a strategic disposition on Meghan's behalf, suggesting deliberate aim rather than an inadvertent romantic liaison. It is essential to acknowledge that these allegations are still disputed and unproven officially, and their placement here represents the content of reports regarding what Ferguson may address rather than established facts. Ferguson is reportedly well equipped to elucidate the network of individuals and occurrences that may have aided Meghan's assimilation into prominent social circles. This may encompass detailed accounts of dinners, special events, and introductions by influential intermediaries such as Anderson and Berkel. Offering this backdrop seeks to illustrate that Meghan's trajectory aligned with established networks of patronage and access, elucidating how a Hollywood professional became close to the British aristocracy and its associated social frameworks. Observers highlighting this facet of the purported memoir depict it as an endeavor to delineate with precision the interconnected framework that has historically supported social mobility into elite circles. Furthermore, others acquainted with Ferguson reportedly believe she may provide insight into the circumstances that contributed to the Sussexes' alleged estrangements from former acquaintances in Britain, especially the narrative involving Tom Skippy Inskip and his spouse. The guest list for the wedding reception and the choices about invitations to evening parties have been a frequent subject of conjecture. Rumors indicate that specific exclusions were due to apprehensions about maintaining a newly crafted public persona. Ferguson's purported understanding of those social networks may enable her to delineate the causes behind the tension or cessation of specific friendships, enriching narratives regarding the deterioration of enduring relationships in the lead-up to and following the royal wedding. Collectively, these potential revelations and alleged prior interest in another royal, a more comprehensive depiction of the gatekeepers facilitating social elevation and rationales for the dissolution of specific friendships, would, according to advocates of the narrative contest, the image of Meghan as an unsuspecting outsider, daunted by royal existence. They would want to portray her as an individual who has consistently practiced strategic social navigation. The efficacy of such a reframing in persuading the public remains questionable. However, it evidently possesses the capacity to confuse opposing narratives. The response from Buckingham Palace regarding the potential Ferguson biography has been described in public sources as lacking a cohesive position. Observers note a clear disparity in the strategies preferred by King Charles and Prince William, shaped by distinct priorities, relationships, and risk evaluations. Accounts suggest that King Charles adopts a reconciliatory stance, aware that his initial reign necessitates a consistent emphasis on institutional stability. From this viewpoint, a candid narrative by a former sister-in-law could unearth delicate familial recollections and provide diversion. Consequently, sources indicate that the king may be amenable to negotiations, providing assurances, symbolic acknowledgement, or financial concessions as a realistic strategy to alleviate the potential repercussions of a detrimental release. Insiders perceive Prince William's position as more inflexible. It is implied that his primary concern is safeguarding the future integrity of the crown. Considering the current tension between his branch of the family and the Sussexes, a publication that further diminishes Harry and Meghan's public reputation may be perceived as having minimal negative impact on William's own standing. In such analysis, yielding to overt publishing by a marginal royal may seem superfluous or even detrimental. The disparity in strategic preferences between the monarch and his heir, if correctly conveyed, creates a subtle imbalance in the palace's strategy to allocate political or financial resources to mitigate a potential controversy, or to endure the reputational costs as an acceptable collateral consequence. This bifurcated strategy indicates a wider trend in modern royal governance choices regarding whether to confront, accommodate, or disregard potentially detrimental disclosures are influenced by the status of the individuals concerned. For instance, whether they are working royals, performing official functions, and the perceived interests of the institution. Meghan and Harry, no longer functioning as active members of the royal family and residing overseas, possess diminished institutional protection compared to individuals who undertake public activities on behalf of the crown. Consequently, others assert, based on the reporting, that the examination of permits aimed at them may serve as a containment strategy, redirecting focus from more critical risks. The palace's public silence should not be interpreted solely as apathy, but rather as a deliberate intermission during which important stakeholders evaluate prospective outcomes and consider conflicting agendas. The processes involved in the creation of such a memoir are a matter of conjecture. Publishing a prominent book of this kind generally necessitates talks with a literary agent, the engagement of legal and editorial teams, and maybe the inclusion of a ghostwriter or collaborator, skilled in refining personal narratives for broad audiences. Prospective publishers would evaluate both the commercial viability of a Ferguson book, considering the persistent public intrigue around the royal family, and the legal dangers, especially allegations that could lead to defamation charges. In the United Kingdom and the United States, libel and privacy laws impose distinct limitations, prompting any economically oriented author to subject a book to thorough legal scrutiny to reduce the risk of expensive litigation. The procedure may result in promised revelations being diluted, reworded, or omitted to mitigate legal risks, thereby impacting the book's perceived transparency and newsworthiness. Strategic issues regarding timing and format also exist. An author and publisher must determine whether to release a conventional memoir, serialize selected excerpts to generate interest, or supplement the book with broadcast and digital content, such as interviews, podcast appearances, television features, or a coordinated social media initiative. The Sussexes have embarked on a multimedia strategy, securing agreements for streaming content and interviews. A biography by Ferguson would likely be positioned within the same saturated attention economy, potentially intensifying rather than mitigating public discourse. In contrast, a meticulously scheduled and legally scrutinized approach could mitigate the instant spectacular effect, while fostering progressive shifts in public perception. If Ferguson proceeds, the anticipated public response is expected to be diverse. For segments of the public inclined towards suspicion about the Sussexes, Ferguson's narrative may serve as validation of entrenched doubts and affect opinion surveys and commentary platforms. Individuals who perceive Meghan and Harry with greater empathy, recognizing them as individuals who posed challenging inquiries regarding racism, media encroachment, and institutional stagnation, may regard Ferguson's book as a vindictive or self-serving response. Media organizations would be divided by commercial interests. Tabloids and click-driven platforms would emphasize sensational excerpts, whereas broadsheets would strive to contextualize the account within a broader analytical framework regarding the royal family's navigation of loyalty, privacy, and power in contemporary society. Beyond transient media cycles, there exists the issue of legal and reputational ramifications for the individuals identified. If Ferguson were to assert specific assertions regarding other live individuals, allegations that may be deemed factual rather than opinion-based, those individuals might initiate legal action to demand retraction or seek damages. The mere prospect of litigation can deter publishers and authors, influencing the editorial decisions in the final book. The interaction of legal strategy, business motivation, and reputational considerations will certainly characterize any editorial direction Ferguson may pursue. The release of a memoir by a close yet neutral insider would provide both risks and opportunities for the royal family as a whole. Risk exists as it may provoke additional examination of unsolved issues and furnish explicit details that the family would need to confront publicly or allow to fester in the backdrop of public discourse. The opportunity to reply to such a book by rectifying falsehoods, providing clarifications, or highlighting themes of reconciliation could be utilized as a component of a comprehensive communications strategy designed to enhance institutional legitimacy. The chosen course of action is contingent upon which family members and institutional representatives perceive they have the most stakes in addressing the content of any grievances. The cultural implications extend beyond the internal politics of the royal family. Memoirs of individuals associated with public institutions resound as they frequently assert their role in addressing selective silences, reframing well-known narratives, and redistributing empathy. In the modern media landscape, audiences not only engage with these narratives, but also utilize them as tools for identity formation and political discourse. Both supporters and detractors engage in conflicting narratives regarding persons and institutions, which contribute to broader discussions about class privilege, accountability, and authenticity. A memoir by Ferguson is perceived not merely as a personal narrative, but as a possible intervention in public discourse regarding the formation of elites, the management of reputations, and the utilization of personal histories for political or economic purposes. Another aspect to contemplate is the influence of memory, both individual and communal, in constructing narratives of the past. Memory is selective, influenced by the narrator's perspective, and frequently reconstructed based on subsequent events. In families as institutionally significant as the Windsors, many individuals possess divergent memories of identical events, compelling the public to evaluate conflicting accounts in the absence of an objective record. A memoir by Ferguson would thus serve not merely as an impartial account, but as an assertion of interpretative authority, an attempt to shape the understanding of events and intentions in the future. The potential publication of such a book has elicited considerable attention, as it promises not merely fresh material, but a novel interpretive framework presented by an individual claiming the authority to provide it. Political factors also subtly influence the calculations. The monarchy's public perception in the United Kingdom varies with generational shifts, economic challenges, and cultural discussions. Controversies highlighting internal divides or purported hypocrisies might influence public perceptions on the institution's relevance and legitimacy. Consequently, those within the palace are vigilant not only regarding immediate reputational harm, but also concerning the enduring impact of narratives on public perceptions of royal purpose. For King Charles, whose ascension came after extensive examination, the necessity to maintain institutional continuity is particularly pressing. For his successor, the consideration is safeguarding a future monarchy from being portrayed as feeble or lenient. A memoir that enhances perceptions of dysfunction may consequently produce far-reaching impacts that transcend personal grievances. Lastly, there exists the human aspect. In addition to formulating narrative control and institutional repercussions, memoirs frequently serve as endeavors by their writers to comprehend complex lives, to affirm dignity following scandal, to regain agency after marginalization, or to validate emotions that seemed disregarded. For Sarah Ferguson, who has perpetually navigated her existence in the public eye, the need to recount her narrative might be seen in this context. Any decision to publish, whether driven by personal justice, financial considerations, or a desire to rectify perceived grievances, would embody both individual motivations and societal repercussions. The memoir is currently conjectural. The endurance of the rumors suggests that a narrative is unfolding despite its ultimate shape remaining undetermined. If Sarah Ferguson proceeds with publication, she will not merely be sharing personal recollections. She will be claiming a position in the historical narrative, potentially altering perceptions of the motives and acts of others. Within the realm of the royal family, where institutional preservation and personal story are intricately linked, the release of a new memoir can shift public empathy and redefine legacies for years ahead. Regardless of the Duchess of York's choice to narrate her story or abstain, the discourse she has initiated highlights a more profound reality about this institution. The past is perpetually unresolved, and the finality of conclusions is seldom absolute. Thank you for watching the video. Please let us know your thoughts, and goodbye for the time being.